So I just got the new game Elden Ring, and I haven't gotten a new game in quite a while. But I knew I just had to get this one because I'm just such a fan of From Software games. Ever since I played the first Dark Souls game, and Dark Souls 2 helped me get through a really rough time in my life. Now I'll get into why it helped me through a difficult time in my life later on in this video, but right now I want to ask the question, do all video games really need to have an easy mode? Now obviously there are many arguments for or against why games should or should not have an easy mode, so we're gonna go over them one after another, starting with the strongest argument for why all games should have an easy mode, accessibility. Now when it comes to marginalized groups like minorities, the one we seem to talk about the least is disabled people. Now there's a reason for that. Being disabled is a very broad spectrum, so it's completely impossible to cover all the disabled problems all at the same time. You have to do them one by one, each individually. The first thing that usually pops into someone's mind when they think of a disabled person is a guy in a wheelchair. Now obviously, being in a wheelchair won't affect your skills at video games, unless it's Dance Dance Revolution. But what about people with only one hand, or no hands? Or the other dozens to hundreds of disabilities they could possibly have? For example, my disability. I have one of the worst cases of dyslexia in the world. I have to focus to tell the difference between the word how and who because the letters dance around. In other words, I'm a very slow reader, so I often don't read item descriptions. And just recently in Elden Ring, I didn't know that if you use the teleport item, you lose all the runes you collected. Why would you even put this item in the game? If you die, you still go back to the last bonfire or whatever it's called in this game, and you still have a chance to get your runes back. Often when I receive a really long comment, I just copy it, go into text-to-speech, and play the comment. I would absolutely love it if all games had an option to read out text to you. I understand that not every game can afford voice acting, but at least have a text-to-speech bot in them. But I also understand that that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. But I do think it should be mandatory in all video games that you can map whatever button to do whatever. What if I don't want the B button to make my character attack? What if I want it to be the right shoulder button instead? This would not only be a good option for someone who only has one hand or really bad arthritis, but also for people who don't have a disability that would affect their gaming skills. For example, take a casual player who played the game Halo but then played the game Fallout New Vegas. They got used to the A button being the jump button, because the A button is normally the jump button. But for some reason in Fallout New Vegas, the jump button was the Y button. It will take a casual player some time to adjust their muscle memory. They will get chased by a melee enemy and try to jump on a rock to escape them, but because they press the A button and not the Y button, they don't jump on the rock, and they get hit. For example, you may be good at video games now, but what happens when you get old and develop arthritis in your hands? Someone telling you to get good, scrub, would probably really piss you off.
You damn Delta Jenners, I'll have you know, when I was at my prime, I could kick all of your asses in Elden Ring 7.
Okay, Zoomer. I'm a very slow reader, but because of my disability, it's hard for me to read books. So instead, I listen to audiobooks. This would be a great segue into this video was sponsored by Audible.com, but no, they didn't sponsor me. Does listening to an audiobook give me the same experience as someone reading a book? No. But me listening to an audiobook won't take away the enjoyment of someone else reading the book. Book readers are not exactly gatekeeping me and saying, get good, scrub, this book ain't for you. So technically, someone playing a game on easy mode is not taking anything away from me enjoying a hard game, right? Well, yes, I'm not going to get mad if there's an optional easy mode on the next From Software game. But now let's make an argument in favor for games not having an easy mode. Whenever this question of should games have an easy mode or a skip boss fight button, it's only ever brought up around the really hard games. Dark Souls and other From Software games, Cuphead, Hollow Knight. But what about games that are just way too unfun for people who are really skilled? For example, the fourth video game I ever owned as a kid was Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Do you want to know how many times I died in that game? 4 times! 3 times it was to those pigs, because it was just so fun pissing them off and having them chase me. And once was against the final boss, because I couldn't figure out how to defeat him until I read what Zelda told me to do. The combat in that game was made for someone who never played a video game before. Now granted, it was the 4th video game I played, but still it was pretty damn easy. But that game still took me a full year to finish. But if it was so easy, why did it take me a whole year? Well, the combat was easy, but the puzzles were bone-crushingly difficult. Like, who was this game made for? Someone who's really good at figuring out how to finish puzzles, but doesn't know that you're supposed to swing the sword at the bokoblin? I really like the story in the Assassin's Creed games, but the combat is just way too easy. By the way, I played the original all the way to the 3rd one, and all the games in between. But I just had to drop the series, because the combat was just so repetitive and easy. If it's a stealth game, the combat should be hard. I should be punished for getting caught. And I don't like being punished in a story mode quest where it goes, you got caught, lol, you lose, you have to start the level over now. Because I know if the game didn't make me lose immediately and just sent a bunch of soldiers out to attack me, I could take them all down with no sweat. The overwhelming majority of games are too easy for me, even some games on the hardest difficulty, like Immortal Phoenix Rising. Yeah, I had difficulty at first, but late game I felt in. There are only a few select, only hard mode games out there. If all games are going to have an easy mode, then all games should also have a bone-crushingly difficult mode. In the same way you can't finish a game because it's too hard for you so you can't enjoy the story, even though you can just technically look up a Let's Play, it's harder for me to enjoy the game when the game is too easy, especially when I see a cutscene of my character getting his ass kicked when I could have easily destroyed the enemies that were attacking him if I was in control. Well, now let's get into another argument for why video games should have an easy mode. It would make the job of games journalists easier. Yeah, there's not a whole lot of arguments for why video games should have an easy mode. It usually is just accessibility, it's not taking away anything from the hardcore players if it's implemented, and this argument is often brought up by games journalists because let's be honest here, if all video games did have an easy mode, games journalists would actually pick it because it would make their jobs a hell of a lot easier. But the 2 arguments they do have are certainly good points. It would make games accessible for more people, and it wouldn't take anything away from the hardcore gamers. Now, could there be other arguments out there for why games need easy modes? I guess, but I certainly haven't heard them, and if they do exist, they're probably not as good as the first 2. So the rest of this video is going to be focusing on the other side of the argument. Let's talk about things from a narrative perspective. Let's say there's a boss who has a tragic backstory, where he lost his whole family to demons, and he spent the rest of his life hunting down demons, slaying them one after another, until he too got corrupted by the demon blood, becoming one of the greatest demons in all the land. Wouldn't that be completely ruined if you could two-shot him? Don't get me wrong, even in really hard games, people figure out how to cheese bosses, but their souls know the truth. They're absolutely cheating and not playing the game how it's meant to be played. Just so you all know, if you cheese bosses to beat a game, you're not MLG. You're a tryhard. Also, what exactly is an easy mode? I know it sounds like an easy question to answer, but really think about it. Most games I have played will just increase or decrease the damage the enemy deals depending on what mode you pick. Sometimes it also changes the amount of health enemies have, which is sometimes frustrating on harder difficulties because enemies sometimes have the health bar of a fridge. And it can also lead to a whole bunch of balancing issues. Take the Halo games for instance. On the easier difficulties, you have to almost try to get killed because the enemies do so little damage. But a vehicle will still one-shot you if it rams into you. What else should games do? Should they increase or decrease the amount of enemies? How would you make platforming games easier? Would you just make platforms bigger? What about strategy games? Or fighting games? Rhythm games, puzzle games, there's more than just one type of game out there. Increasing or decreasing the damage may work for some games, but not all games, and the other examples I brought up sound like they will take a lot more coding, and games are already delayed enough as it is. But now let's get into the best argument for why all video games do not need an easy mode. And that is, just because a game is hard doesn't mean it's impossible. Listen, the whole accessibility argument, I've never heard from a disabled person. Just because a game is hard doesn't mean it's impossible. Trust me, I wasn't a master of Dark Souls the first time I played it. I had to die like 500 times. Even in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, after I practiced throughout the entire game, the last boss kicked my ass at least 28 times before I finally killed him. I'm not gonna lie, plenty of times throughout Dark Souls, Sekiro, Cuphead, and several other games, I just put down my controller and I said, it's impossible, I just can't do it. But once I finally beat that boss, I just felt such a triumphant feeling. And after replaying the games a few times, I can get through them pretty easily. Hell, it only took me to play through Sekiro 4 or 5 times before I was able to do a no-death run. Granted, I did a no-death run with the Join Owl ending, but come on, it was my 4th or 5th try. The best things in life are the things you have to work for. You wouldn't get that same experience if you could just opt into an easy mode whenever. And I don't want to take that away from people, even if they think that's what they want at that moment. I did a video on this channel that I now unlisted because I want to remake it, but it was about my favorite game in the world, Dark Souls 2. I know it's considered the black sheep of the trilogy, but honestly, that game saved my life. I was just ready to commit self-deletion, unalive myself, unplug the power cord. When you get down to it, the Dark Souls series is kind of an allegory for depression. You have all these giant monsters that can knock you down with ease, and you don't have a whole lot of things at your disposal to deal with them. Failing over and over and over again won't destroy you, but giving up, that's what makes you go hollow. And when that game was pretty much the only thing I had in my life, never being able to opt into an easy mode and having to try at it over and over and over again. Once I finally finished it, I looked at my own life and realized that's what I gotta do. I started my Just a Robot channel, and I got knocked down a lot. But no matter what happens, I just keep going. Cause I know no matter what happens, nothing will stop me unless I do some Kira the Wolf or EDP shit. So should all games have an easy mode? Well, I don't really see too much harm if it happens, but if a game doesn't have an easy mode, oh well. If you're gonna pick up a From Software game, you should already know it's gonna be a hard game. You can't really force a game to have an easy mode unless of course you install mods or something, or use magic in the first Dark Souls game. But if a game doesn't have an easy mode, oh well, that's like a handful of games compared to the hundreds upon hundreds of games that are just too easy. Anyways, guys, I know I haven't uploaded that much, but that's because I've been distracted with Elden Ring, but I'm going to be taking a few days off of work here pretty soon, so once that happens, I'm going to be working on a really big video for you guys. Anyways, catch you all next time.